let's just be friendly.
Greatest contact. Single bogey and it's nearly on top of us.
Identify.
No transponders, no recognition codes. It has to be a silent radar.
Cockpit is fairly well completed. I have maybe one or two additional pieces to put in here. Got the front view here, front main screen, the side screens, and pretty well have something in each of the slots. I definitely need lots and lots of practice with the photo etch. Again, having not done it before, learning that paint doesn't cover up the world of problems. Fortunately, I think by setting this in the actual Viper, I believe that a lot of this detail will be hidden as we, let me just go ahead and see if I can't close this up a little bit. There we go. Yeah, so not quite right, but yeah, so you can see that most of your detail will be covered. Unless you're really getting twisted and turned in there, but I think from the from the rear or so, you should be able to get a pretty good shot of the screens, especially when they're lit up. And for a first attempt, I think I'm pleased with that. So we'll go from there. Thank you. Okay, continuing on with the Viper, I've got the hull and the engine pods and all of that drying in primer. So I thought I'd turn my attention to the guns and to the intake fans and some of the other items that we can move ahead with. I did get the front landing gear primed. Because I've got the headlights in that, I didn't want to spray those, even though I've got them covered with a little bit of liquid mask. I just went ahead and hand brushed the primer on there, and then because of the gold, or I'm sorry, the gray metallic I'm going to use for the landing gear, it brushes on really nice, so I'm not too worried about that. And I might even blacken the wheels a little bit when what comes up to that point. Right now I'm working on the cannons, and we'll get those glued up and primed and then painted and detail painted. I typically work on the pilot or the figurine last because that's one of my weaker spots, but we'll take care of that in a bit. The other things we have to go here are the covers for the landing bays, or the landing gear, in that the landing gear will have these covers on them in the open position, as I intend to have this as a landed model at that stage. And then the other piece to deal with are the three inlets for the engines and the front nose piece. Time to get those cleared off, and then I'll leave this on here on the sprue, which is the final piece for the cockpit. And maybe you can see from the cockpit here that's pretty well dried now, and I think if some lights get behind that, I think I'm going to be okay. I think I'm going to be pleased with the way that's going to turn out. I don't know if you can see that in the video or not, but once you get some lights behind it, all the gauges kind of light up, and you know, gives it a little bit of life to that there. And then, like I said, I'll do some painting on the switches, toggles, and put some white and blacks in there, and work on some of the other pieces. But for now, we're letting that glue dry, and off we go. So we'll come back to you after we get some of this glued up and primed, and then we'll see where modeling takes us. Okay, so we're dealing with a little bit of a setback here on the cockpit lighting. I was testing out the lighting as far as its view, or how it looks with lighting up the different panels and so forth, and when I did that, I was actually pretty disappointed. I don't think I'm going to get enough lumens out of the lighting that I chose. The way I was going to have this set up was the longer one here was going to be underneath like so and glued in, and that actually gives me a pretty decent amount of light there on that front one because the bulb's right there. However, working across the two sides, and I was going to glue those in, what I'm getting is just a hot spot on either the one of the two round ones here or the gauges and so forth up there, and it's just not providing enough light for me to be happy with that along that stretch. So what I've decided to do, I'm going to redo a long one for the front here still. I think that's a nice look. I don't have any complaints on that. I think by placing that right, I'm going to have just right amount of light. So I'm going to just redo another one with a new resistor on that warm white LED. And then I'm going to use, this is 5 volt. This is a 5 volt LED strip. And what I'll do is tape one side here that'll to the fuselage. It's nice and thin, and that'll give quite a bit of light up into that process. I don't know if I can get these to light up here without a pigtail associated with it. Sometimes you can if you just hit your alligator clips just right. Yeah, so light up. So you can see that that's going to make a huge difference in how that brings light into that cockpit. Both sides really change the dynamic of providing light across the full spectrum and across the full width of that. And then the cockpit, behind the cockpit is white, and I don't think I need it here, but I think it will help just by having it forward enough that's going to help across lighting up that entire section there. So that's what we're going to move to on the interior of the cockpit, along with the one warm light that's up at the front. So I'll wire and solder those up and come back with you in a while. Alright, so we've made a little progress here, and I am so glad I went down the path that I went by replacing just those two 3mm warm light bulbs with the SMDs. So from that side you can really see how the full LED strip tape, which is in there, I've just got the hull plugged up a little bit right now, how the full LED strip tape actually opens up much more light across the entire canopy or cockpit on each side, both the left and the right, and then that warm white in the middle lights up the main cockpit. I've got the Cylon radar there in my sights. Hopefully I'll be able to take him down. So where are we at? Sunday evening here, April the 15th. At this point, first of all, we've got 4 inches of snow out there on the ground in Holland, Michigan, so I'm not thrilled with that. This is the front landing gear, and it's just in there by friction fit, but and I don't have the let me see if I can just turn that light on just for a second here. I don't know if I've got that wire stripped enough to make contact. As a matter of fact, I know I don't, so I'm going to just leave it as is. But that actually has two tiny little SMDs, 0.0405 SMDs there on each side where my fingers are at, finger and thumb nail are. And I'm going to use those as the landing lights on one of the episodes where you see the full, Viper here. When they're on the ground at one of the planets, you can actually see where they've got landing lights. And the same thing, a couple of shots that I've seen where they are coming into the landing bay or the nacelles on the side of the Battlestar Galactica. They've got their lights lit up as they come in. So that's not something that would be unheard of. So I've got that, and then I've got those routed out the back here. There's the lights for the landing bay, and I want those on a circuit, I think, separate. I'm not exactly sure what the entire circuit's going to be, but that is going to be in place. And so for tonight, I think that's going to do it. And then we'll tune in again to see how we come along with painting. We'll mask all this off and paint it once we get the seam sealed up. I am pretty pleased with the way that seam comes together with the cockpit in place. I don't think that's going to take any putty. I'm just going to wipe that down with acetone, that seam down with acetone, and then I can actually use cement on it, and once that's sealed up, then we can work towards the back and add the engine component side. So, but for a cockpit, my first one again with the photo etch, I'm actually pretty pleased. A long way to go on that, because I'm not nearly the perfectionist that Lou Dalmaso is, or Simon Merckx, but for me, just to see a cockpit light up like that, and I'm going to do that one more time, just to see a cockpit light up with all the different dials and nodes and so forth, compared to what it would have been just a painted static model. I'm actually kind of pleased with that. I don't think I'm going to fill in the 2 holes there beneath the pilot's feet. I'm just going to fit them down into those spaces and let the light diffuse up through there. Same thing with some of the light leaks that are down in that. I'm not going to even mess with those, because I want some diffused light to light up the pilot a little bit. I'll start painting him next week and placing him in after we're going. So it's going to be a lot of fun as we move this forward. I'm really working on the problem solving of how to make this all come together. I think I can eliminate almost all the light leaks just with make sure we get this thing glued up and put everything in place. So for now, we will sign off, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you. All right. So I was doing some testing late last night, and I came to realize that my light blocking was going to be insufficient. When I had this in the dark and turned on the SMDs that I had inside here, this thing lit up like a Christmas tree. Everywhere that there was one of these extra pieces of plastic in here, or a locator pin, even this piece here, once it got to light, it transferred right out to the outer skin. And with this light paint, I don't think that it was going to come through. So I sprayed another coat of black and then another coat of white primer on the insides of the fuselage here, and then I went ahead and sprayed a galvanized tin color on the 2 outsides here. We'll let that dry for a while before we play with it, but that's on there. Additionally, I painted a coat of black on the exterior of the engine housing. I'll have to sand some of this, but that's all right with new primer. That's okay. And then I painted again galvanized tin. The directions say to use silver, but I think that's far too light, especially when you look at also adding the dark of the just a solid gray here on the back. By doing that, I think that it gives it a nice balance on to the far front. And in the front, of course, we'll have the same gray as this on the nose piece, which I have painted the interior there with the silver and the pale, and now it's just a matter of going around and doing the gray stripe, which is this entire outer nose here on the gray stripe there. I didn't want to try and light block again on the inside. It's really hard to get paint into there, but I think with a full coat of black on the outside and then having this on the inside, we're there. I also did add the photo etch part there that you can see along with the white diffuser. When I put the lights in there last night, it actually looked pretty good. So what we're working with is now I've got to figure out how to paint this. Masking this off is going to be a pretty significant challenge. It's supposed to be gray, but it's not supposed to be as dark gray as this piece is here. So I do have to figure that out and work through it, and of course I'll get there with the painting. And then this will be a pale. I've been using actually a light gray as the color that you see here, light gray on the wings, which are done, and the tailpiece, which is done in light gray, and then the fuselage and that center section in this bottom will all be done in light gray after I mask and get ready to spray that area there. So once that's in and done, the front engine housing intakes are also done in light gray, so they're done cooling in the other room, or are drying in the other room. This primer is still a little sticky. It needs to dry, and then I'm ready finally, again, like I said, to finally put the cockpit into the side of the hulls and glue everything down inside there with some hot glue, low temp hot glue. And once those are in, then we can seal up this fuselage and get after the masking and the taping and see how that goes. So for now, we're going to let some paint dry. That's never any fun to watch, but we'll let that happen. And when we come back, we'll probably be seeing starting to glue the hot glue in place, and then we'll also look at a wiring feed. I just put these in temporary, so I want to get the feed wires up into the bottom of the housing here of the engine housing. These are just temporary placeholders, so I want to pull those and start putting fresh wire, magnet wire, green and a red. Red for positive, green for negative, up to the inside of the engine bay. Both of these rear landing struts have the wires that are running, so I do have the capability of running 2 circuits out to the base, and I think what those circuits are going to be is 1 circuit for the strobe, and then another circuit for the rest of it. So that's just kind of the way it works by putting that strobe in the base, that strobe circuit in the base, or that little circuit board in the base. That really doesn't give me a lot of options to run another signal up that same wire though. So with that, like I said, we're going to put all this together and start getting the lights in. We've got them all pre-wired, but just getting them mounted, getting the cockpits closed up and so forth. So that's kind of the next on the agenda. Thank you. All right, so let's talk about progress on a few things here as we progress on the Moebius 1/32 scale original series, the original series Viper. So what I've got here is I'm ready to. I've got the main hull actually ready to glue together. I've wiped this down with acetone on the insides here so that will stick. And so that is ready to glue. I've got all of the wiring done on the inside, and I've got the wires to feed here. Those wires will actually feed into, those 4 wires there will feed into these 4 holes here, which will lead into the back of the unit where the main engine bays are once that's in place. I've got the gold fans, or the silver fans, painted. I thought that those turned out pretty nice in there, along with the cream on the inside. This piece has been painted. I am going to decal this next, I think, is probably my next course of action before I install, because once it's installed, you are done. There's really no room to move. It'll be essentially slide this in, slide it back over that. Got the, whatever, I'm not sure even what you call this, whatever this engine mechanisms are here, the inlets and so forth. Those have been painted a tin, galvanized tin color, slightly metallic, not quite gray, just solid gray, but a gray metallic in there. And I'll use copper, gold, and silver to bring out the highlights of all of that mechanism. It's actually pretty cool. Then I'll have to paint this here, tape that, paint this the regular hull color. I'm going to paint an aluminum here on the inside of these, or maybe actually I'm going to do those black now that I think about it, because that'll look nice in contrast with the flat aluminum that we put together for the landing gear. So we'll work that forward here in a bit. Once that's done, I'll have the back here to work through. You can see where I've got some of the stuff. I'll have the back here to work with, and let's see if we can't just pull this forward here for a quick second and turn it on. I'll have the back open in order to connect these 4 wires here in the unit. And let's see if we've got power here. And let's go to the positive. So yeah, so we are powered up. Now, I did remove the photo etch and the diffuser here. Not so much that I didn't like the look. I actually enjoyed the look, liked the look, but I didn't have enough room where my bulbs were placed. One of the things I didn't account for was how the depth of these bulbs. You can see that they're just overlapping, by the head, if not less than that, outside. and then these are right at the surface level. So by installing this piece here, I'm able to get right down to exactly where we're at. But it does put those heads of those bulbs directly against the plastic in there. And it does to give me a nice look. There is a bit of a hot spot. I'm sure coming up on camera it really looks very hot, but there's that hot spot. And for the most part, though, in real life, I'm pretty pleased with that. You have to be absolutely dead on to see the head-on hot spots in there, and most people are going to see it from an angle, and they're just going to see flickering inside of that gray. So I'm going to leave this gray piece off until I've got all the wiring done. Once all that wiring's done, I can seal it up, and I actually might just paint this before I put it on, because there's plenty of room for the componentry to do this in segments. So that's probably the next goal. We'll remove this gray, and then the next piece would be to feed power up to paint, and then feed power up to there, and then start wiring from the back. And it's actually pretty nice to have this space here once you pop off the engine exhaust. It's nice to have this space here to work with. Plenty of wiring. I can do soldering and then encapsulate all that wiring in this component set here. So for right now, I think that's the update at the moment, and then as we move and progress, I think we'll see this thing come together. I do really like this paint. This is just a Michaels paint color called light gray, and to me it's as close as you can get to the hull. And then once this is done, I'll put a gloss coat on, and then I like more of a matte finish for the Viper. I don't think I really want just a flat finish like this is. So maybe I'll look for a little matte finish and get that sprayed on, and go from there. So that's the update for now. So let's take a minute to talk about glues and bonding. Obviously, if I've got primer and multiple coats of paint on this, we all know that nothing sticks to that from as far as plastic cement. And so what I've got here in my little jar is just methyl-ethylene. It's a high-powered solvent that you can get at Lowe's or Home Depot or Menards, any of your stores. And basically all I'm doing is going across here, and it's really melting that paint off, or dissolving that paint. Quick little rinse back, and once that paint is dissolved and cleaned off, it's going to make being able to do a joint in that paint where the cement will actually, like your 10X or your liquid cement, any of those things will actually stick. So by doing this, I've got the ability to actually pull that seam together, and once I'm able to use a plastic cement in there, not only will the seam stick, but it'll keep light leaks more to a minimum on the actual seam itself, and this gives a nice smooth piece. Now you want to be careful not to get this on your LED lights. Not really slathering it, just using the brush and creating just again a fresh spot to bind the glue to. And by doing that, that's giving me just the, and I'll do this on all the sides here, but by doing that, that's giving me a surface to bond to. I recently did a USS Enterprise, and I might post a video of that here soon. And I didn't do this step, and it was glue paint on paint, and in essence what I ended up with was a very, very poor bond. And quite frankly, a good ways through the build, I actually lost. I got a crack. I got a crack in my seam, and I had to dig it out and clean it and bond it. And I guess what I'll say is that it was a giant pain in the neck once you think you got all your light leaks, to then go back in and touch it back up and make that happen. So I don't know if this is going to pick it up, but you can see basically I'm back down to the raw plastic, and it's really going to be kind of crucial right here at this back seam behind the seat. And I'm not worried about that discoloration because that'll all be hidden. And then finally we'll get this last portion here. I'm glad I've got a bit of leeway on that wiring, that I'll be able to move that back and forth without damaging my paint on my front landing gear there. And once I get this, and actually that'll make it nice, I can paint that without having to tape it off, and that should give me just a little bit of space to work with. So again, we're back down to raw plastic on that, and it's just a discoloration of having done this with enough primers and paints that you're seeing a discoloration, and not necessarily black paint on that seam. And we'll do one more joint right there. And the other thing you want to be careful of is when you're doing this, don't have the seams touch, because essentially this is what your cement, what your plastic glues are, your plastic cements are, is methylethylene or a derivative thereof, and you'll develop a bond right there. So that is what we're going to do for cleaning up that. And now I'm ready to close that up and run a nice couple of beads of just typically what I use for seams is liquid cement for plastic models. The Model Master, I like it. I like the applicator. I know that there's other stuff out there. Sometimes I'll use this Plastruct plastic weld, and what that does is it gives just, again, it's a plastic solvent cement and keeps it up. So those are kind of two different versions of that. And then finally, I like this Flexifile. This is really nice touch and flow system, and ultimately sometimes I do like Tamiya Thin. I like this for clear parts. Sometimes that really seems to hold nice without a lot of extra paint on it. So bear with me, we'll close this back up and we're ready to close up the hull.